place winners of the climate Hack2Action, led by the Brookfield Institute in Ryerson at the DMC, I guess a couple weeks ago now. And so I guess a little bit of background about us. We are sort of friends / colleagues who came together for this hackathon, and it took us a lot further than we ever expected to go. We showed up to this hackathon with no idea or some really weird ideas. And by the end of it, after walking through 2 days of design thinking and really having the help of mentors to help us tear apart our ideas, we came out with something completely different. And so the idea of the hackathon was to come up with a solution to reduce carbon emissions in Ontario. And we went in with an idea to reduce home heating costs and something like that, but by the end of it, we came out with a solution to improve our local food system. And so the idea we came up with was called Spin the Yard, and based on the idea that the current industrial agricultural system is extremely carbon heavy right now. So food is traveling hundreds of thousands of miles to get to our plate, and is one of the heaviest emission sources in Ontario. And so basically, we all know that the solution is local food. We need to eat food that's grown in our communities and in our cities to reduce the amount of carbon associated with consuming food. But what we found I guess some of us have a little bit of background in food policy, but through the hackathon and additional research following, we found that one of the biggest barriers to young farmers is access to land. And right now, the average age of farmers in Ontario is 58 years old, and there's no new young farmers coming in to farm land because of the cost of land and capital associated with starting a farm in rural areas. So at the same time, we figure that there's all this unused space around us, especially in the suburbs in the Greater Golden Horseshoe area of Ontario, and where these people have a yard, we see it as something different. And so we want to find a way to increase access to spin farming, which is small plot intensive agriculture. And this is actually an example from Kelowna, BC. So there's a man in there named Curtis Stone, and on 8 backyards that total a third of an acre, he can grow $75,000 a year. And so we see this as a viable career choice for young farmers if they have access to this land. And so our idea is to connect new urban farmers to landowners with backyards to rent. And so starting out, the solutions being that you have landowners renting out their backyards so that they have a revenue stream and an incentive to give their land to young farmers. There is no more landowner maintenance. You have extremely low carbon vegetables because a farmer is producing something in the backyard. You have jobs created for young farmers, a low carbon food distribution system, and you're creating resilient and healthy communities. So our plan was this is our pitch too. So our plan was to start small and kind of come up with an Airbnb for backyards. But when you look at how Airbnb first started out, it was all about relationship building, and that's what we think needs to happen here. So the idea was to begin building relationships with both farmers and landowners, coming up with a way to cultivate trust, and then eventually growing this model. And so by the end of the hackathon, after 48 hours, Bradley was able to develop a prototype for an app. So our goal being moving away from suburban backyards to something where landowners can share their yards as spin farming locations. And so that's what we came up with at the hackathon. So we have a prototype that Brad can show you guys after. But I don't know.
There was a study done, I think it was it Guelph, that if Guelph's food production was moved to an urban model from the existing model, it would be the equivalent of taking 16,000 cars off the road. So there's a pretty big opportunity.
Thank you for listening. Questions?
What sort of, you said some of you had maybe agricultural or experience in the agricultural sector. What was that?
So I come from an ecology background, and right now I work for Not Far From the Tree, so I have a bit of a food policy background as well.
They're awesome.
So, and then I've done organic farming as woofing, so nothing long term, only a couple weeks at a time.
Cool.
Yeah.
I used to,
Hello. I wrote a report with the Vancouver Economic Commission back in the day on creating this idea of a new sustainable food system and imagining jobs for this new sustainable food system. So yeah.
I'm a solar consultant, and I have some failed vegetables on my balcony.
So I'm an app developer, and I built an app or a prototype app, which is just like a database in a Google Map that we're using where people can fill out their locations for backyards that they want to give out, so we can actually go out and collect people. We had like the 48 hours to do it, so it's kind of a rush job, but we can start collecting people, and that was my contribution.
Have you guys tested the app with anybody, and what have the responses been? So.
Well, the app works, we just haven't really found people yet. Yes.
So I heard that, forgive me, this might not be true, but I heard that Airbnb actually makes money on the spread. So when I give my money to Airbnb to hold the room that you guys have, they invest that money, and then by the time I stay with you, they've had the money for a long time, so they've made something on the money. So if you guys were able to do something like that, where you were able to increase resources and other opportunities for farmers, rather than just create a land transfer situation, what other kind of resource do you think you could provide? And you've talked about relationship building, but what else needs to be part of the solution to make this work?
So I'm not sure about that. I didn't know that about Airbnb, but our vision is to handle the problems that a farmer would experience in an urban environment and let them farm. So things like zoning, insurance, contracting, business structures, anything that is not farming, and allow them to farm intensively.
Yeah, another thing too is food processing in the city. It would be, like, ideally, it would be cool if there were centralized processing hubs. So there's been a lot of research done on kind of the barriers to urban agriculture in Toronto. A lot of research is out there. And I think there's a lot of space for things to be hacked in some sort of way. So if people are interested in urban agriculture, the research is done, and it's just finding a way to tackle the big barriers to the problem. So zoning, how do you get long-term land use agreements? So it's not only access to land, but how long you're able to stay on that land as well. Processing, transportation, being able to sell in certain locations as well. Selling in your backyard, selling in farmers markets, using food produced in your own yard and that sort of thing. So just kind of pushing the barriers, I guess. So what was really cool about the hackathon is that we were able to present in front of someone from the city of Toronto, and I think one of the questions was, how would you deal with the zoning bylaws? And basically we want to change them, is the answer. It's not about, it's not about dealing with them, it's about changing them and really opening up the landscape so people can farm. Because if that's something the city of Toronto is serious about, then things do have to change.
Have you talked with Robert Orland from Backyard Bounty in Guelph?
So weirdly enough, I know him because he also does consulting for land conservation. So I do know him, but yeah, he's definitely a good person to talk to. And so I guess where we're at now is kind of what after the hackathon, a lot of people came up to us with interest in this idea, and we realized that there's a lot of research that has to be done. There's a lot of great people already doing things, Cultivate Toronto, Toronto Urban Growers Association, and then really connecting with those people and seeing if there's a way for us to use tech to kind of support their initiatives as well.
Just a question back.
Yeah.
Yeah, let me try to look at this, because you mentioned long-term land use agreements, but how do you see like issues of precarious labor and where farmers don't have the fact that they own land and own like lodgings on that land and maybe can farm for subsistence in the backyard? How do you feel about the relationship between the like lessor and the tenant in that kind of arrangement, and how do you think that your app would be able to kind of like navigate through that space and come up with that?
So I come from a solar background, and so I live in the world of solar contracting, and so I was going to suggest a similar sort of revenue sharing agreement. In terms of precarious employment, I mean, I'm not totally sure. Maybe I can ask you what do you mean by that?
Well, for example, if the farmer's not paying equity down on the land, and instead they're going on, like, I don't know what the long-term like land use agreement is like, and if you have to rent out 8 plots of land, average backyard, to make $75,000 net or something, I'm not sure. But it doesn't strike me that farming is like an extremely lucrative business, and there's like a lot of room for like difference in margins. I'm wondering how labor is protected by the fact that they don't own the land, but instead are relying on perhaps like 8 different people in order to like make their yearly income and continue farming. And then even at the end of the day, they don't make enough to ever like, once they enroll, then they're done.
Yeah, so I think the getting old part would certainly have to be looked at, because I think part of a farmer's income at the moment is selling to have their farm developed into a warehouse or something in Vaughan. But the idea is to empower the farmer to make their own income, and so part of our value proposition, I believe, would be to ensure that they have that 8 properties that they need. And if some people bow out and some people bow in, that's up to us to create that network and create the land that they need. Certainly we found that multi-year leases or some sort of a long-term relationship, more than just a summer, is necessary. And we're researching the business model, but the idea is to grow the pie compared to regular farming through this spin farming technique.
But yeah, that's 100% an issue that's facing farmers everywhere. And so we met one guy who has a farm, and he was able to secure a 100-year lease. So something like that would be ideal. And backyards is only one space too that could be opened up for farming. Like there are hydro corridors, schoolyards, all this municipal space is being underused, highway, what do you call those, like medians. But that all requires rezoning to urban agriculture. And before that happens, I don't know how much change we'll see. But anyways, sidebar.
Questions? Oh, yeah.
Yeah, just interested in any perspectives around demand. So you mentioned, the average age of farmers currently, the need for younger farmers to come up. Any insights around the ecosystem that would support that? What demand would there be on both sides in terms of people looking for their land to be rented out to this kind of a thing, of maybe potentially issues might face, and certainly on the farmer side. So young farmers coming up, what does that look like? What opportunities there are support that could be a source long to begin to cultivate an ecosystem like that?
So I think it'll definitely be a slow start. There are young people who are doing this sort of thing, mostly in BC right now. There's quite a big movement happening. There's people who are doing this in Toronto right now. In Rexdale, for example, they knocked down, so 5 homeowners knocked down the fences between their backyards and have turned it into one giant space for a farm. There's been a couple projects that have failed in the past, and we really want to connect with those people and kind of find out why that happened. Because I think there's so many barriers that we haven't even thought of yet that still need to be tackled. And spin farming is, so with farming too, every location is going to be different, so you can't really prescribe one type of farming to a piece of land because soil, light, every condition is going to be different in a different area. So it's kind of working on those relationships to see what fits best. And spin farming is only one type of farming that focuses usually on microgreens, so there's a lot of different types of farming that can be done. It doesn't necessarily have to be spin farming. And then in terms of landowners, we've had quite a lot of people approach us saying, hey, yeah, definitely, like if there was a farmer who wanted to spin my yard, connect them with me. So probably a niche market, but we've had some interest.
We'll take one more. I'm just curious if you guys have thought of any other sort of applications of like new technology other than the app where they could maybe help with this platform as well.
I really want to put camel in there. we do have other ideas, but I don't think you guys are ready for it yet.
They're really out there.
It's basically about like reintroducing democracy back into politics so that we can have these things like zonings changed, but that's for another hackathon. But we're thinking about it, yes. Yeah.
Great, thank you again.
Are you guys going to be around for the rest of the Hacknight?
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay, so if you have any more questions, feel free to chat with them.